The gas station fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the cracked pavement, making everything look tired and desperate. It was just past midnight on a Wednesday in late September, and the air carried that peculiar chill that reminded people winter was coming whether they were ready or not. Station 7 on Route 9 was the kind of place people stopped out of necessity rather than choice. Pumps that worked half the time, a convenience store with bulletproof glass, and a parking lot where nobody made eye contact. Isabella Martinez pulled her 15-year-old Honda Civic up to pump number 4, the only one with a working card reader. The engine coughed twice before dying, a sound that had been getting worse for weeks. She sat behind the wheel for a moment, staring at the dashboard with its constellation of warning lights. Check engine. Low tire pressure. Oil change overdue. Each light represented money she didn't have, problems she couldn't fix. Her phone screen showed 12:17 a.m. and a bank balance of $32.16. The gas tank was on empty, had been flashing its warning for the past 20 miles. She'd driven home from her evening shift at the diner on fumes and prayers, hoping she'd make it. But tomorrow morning she had to be at her day job at the packaging plant by 6, and that was another 12 miles in the opposite direction. Isabella stepped out of the car, wrapping her thin cardigan tighter against the September wind. Her uniform from the diner, a faded pink dress with rosies embroidered on the pocket, still smelled like grease and coffee. She'd worked a double shift, 16 hours on her feet, serving truckers and late-night travelers who rarely tipped more than spare change. She pressed the button for regular unleaded and lifted the nozzle, watching the numbers climb with the mechanical precision of a countdown. $5, $10, $15. Her chest tightened as the total approached what she could afford. $20 would get her to work tomorrow and maybe, if she was careful, last until Friday when her next paycheck cleared. The pump clicked off at $23.47. Isabella stared at the number, her mind racing through calculations she'd performed 1,000 times before. 32.16 minus 23.47 left 8.69. Not enough for the electric bill, sitting unopened in her car. Not enough for the groceries she'd promised herself she'd buy tomorrow. Not enough for the prescription her doctor had written 3 weeks ago that she still hadn't filled. She replaced the nozzle with trembling hands and walked toward the convenience store, fishing crumpled bills from her purse. Through the bulletproof glass, the night clerk looked up from his phone with the bored expression of someone who'd seen every kind of human desperation and stopped caring years ago. Isabella pushed the money through the payment slot, her voice barely audible. Pump 4. The clerk counted the bills with mechanical efficiency. 23.47. I know. Isabella pulled out her wallet, searching through the compartments with increasing desperation. Quarters. Dimes. A few pennies scattered in the bottom. She counted twice, her fingers shaking. $8.19. You're short, the clerk said flatly. I can't afford it. The words came out as barely more than a whisper, but they seemed to echo in the empty store. Isabella felt heat flood her face as tears pressed against the back of her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I'd pumped. Can I just pay for $20 worth? The clerk's expression didn't change. Doesn't work like that. You pump it, you pay for it. Otherwise, I gotta eat the difference from my shift. Please. Isabella's voice cracked. I work 2 jobs. I just got off a 16-hour shift. I need to get to work tomorrow morning. I have $8 right here, and I can bring you the rest on Friday when I get paid. Lady, I hear that story 10 times a night. Can't help you. Isabella pressed her palms against the bulletproof glass, feeling the cool surface against her skin. Behind her, she could hear another car pulling up to the pumps. More witnesses to her humiliation. More people who would watch her fail at the simple task of putting gas in her car. I'll leave my license, she said desperately. My car registration. Something as collateral. Please, I'm begging you. The clerk was already shaking his head when a voice spoke from behind her. How much is she short? Isabella turned, startled by the interruption. The man standing 3 feet away looked completely out of place at Station 7 at midnight. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, the kind of clothing that cost more than Isabella made in a month. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, styled with casual precision. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, gray like storm clouds, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen everything the world had to offer and remained unimpressed by most of it. Dominic Santoro had not intended to stop at this particular gas station. His driver had suggested the newer Shell station 5 miles up the highway, the one with security cameras and bright lighting where men in expensive suits didn't look quite so out of place. But Dominic had been restless all evening, his mind circling problems that had no easy solutions, and he dismissed the driver 3 blocks from his penthouse. Sometimes he needed to drive himself, to feel the wheel in his hands, to navigate streets where he wasn't insulated by bulletproof glass and trained bodyguards, to remember what the world looked like for people who didn't command empires built on legitimate business fronts and carefully structured illegitimate operations underneath. Now, standing in the harsh fluorescent lighting of Station 7, watching a woman in a diner uniform count pennies with shaking hands, Dominic felt something shift in his chest. He'd built his organization by reading people, by understanding their vulnerabilities before they understood them themselves. This woman wasn't running a scam or playing on sympathy. She was exhausted, humiliated, and genuinely desperate. 528? The clerk answered Dominic's question with barely concealed irritation. Dominic pulled his wallet from his jacket pocket, the leather worn soft with age despite the expensive stitching. He extracted a $100 bill and pushed it through the payment slot. Cover her gas. Keep the change for yourself. The clerk's eyes widened as he looked at the bill, then at Dominic, then back at the bill. His entire demeanor transformed from bored hostility to eager cooperation. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Isabella turned to face Dominic fully, her dark eyes wide with shock. I can't accept this. That's too much. I just need 528. Dominic met her gaze steadily. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her features, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many hours working and too few hours sleeping, the lines around her mouth that suggested she spent more time worrying than smiling. But there was something else, too, a dignity in how she held herself despite being at her lowest point, a strength that refused to completely break, even under circumstances that would have shattered most people. Consider it paid forward, Dominic said quietly. Someone helped me once when I needed it. Now I'm helping you. But I don't even know you. You don't need to. Dominic gestured toward her car at Pump 4. Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day. Isabella's hands twisted the strap of her purse, her pride warring with necessity. I should at least get your name, so I can pay you back. You don't pay me back. You help someone else when you're in a position to do so. Dominic turned back toward his own car, a black Mercedes sedan that looked as out of place in this parking lot as its owner. That's how these things work. He was halfway to his car when Isabella called out, Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you. Dominic paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. Something about her expression, the genuine gratitude mixed with lingering disbelief, reminded him of his mother. Elena Santoro had worked 3 jobs after his father died, struggling to keep food on the table and the rent paid. He remembered her coming home at midnight, exhausted and defeated, counting change to buy milk for morning coffee. What's your name? He asked. Isabella. Isabella Martinez. Be safe driving home, Isabella Martinez. He was reaching for his car door when the roar of an engine shattered the quiet night. A pickup truck, jacked up on oversized tires with a rebel flag decal across the back window, squealed into the parking lot, engine revving aggressively. The truck pulled up directly behind Isabella's Honda, blocking it in against the pump. Dominic's hand paused on the door handle as every instinct he'd honed over 30 years in his particular business went on high alert. The truck's doors flew open, and 2 men emerged with the aggressive swagger of people looking for confrontation. The first man was large, over 6 feet and heavily muscled, wearing a stained tank top despite the September chill. Tattoos covered both arms and amateur ink that told a story of prison time and poor decisions. But it was the second man who made Isabella's face go completely white. He was smaller, wiry rather than bulky, with the kind of lean hardness that came from drug use rather than gym time. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild, darting between Isabella and Dominic with manic energy. When he spoke, his words came fast and slurred together. Well, look who's playing around at midnight. My wife. At a gas station with some rich asshole. Ex-wife, Marcus, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the fear Dominic could see in her eyes. We've been divorced for 8 months. Marcus Martinez moved closer to Isabella with jerky, aggressive steps. Divorce papers don't mean shit. You're still mine. And here you are, letting some suit buy you things. What else is he buying, Bella? What else are you selling? The larger man, his friend or backup, Dominic couldn't tell which, positioned himself between Isabella's car and the exit, arms crossed over his massive chest. The message was clear. Nobody was leaving until Marcus was finished with whatever scene he intended to make. Dominic assessed the situation with the cold calculation that had kept him alive through 3 decades of territorial disputes and power struggles. 2 men, both aggressive but the smaller one unstable and probably high on something that made him unpredictable. One potential weapon visible, a baseball bat in the truck's bed. The gas station clerk had already disappeared from view behind his bulletproof glass, probably calling the police or more likely locking himself in the back room until the situation resolved itself. Isabella, Dominic said calmly, not moving from his position by the Mercedes. Is this man threatening you? Marcus's head snapped toward Dominic, his expression twisting into something ugly. Who the fuck do you think you are, talking to my wife? Ex-wife, Isabella repeated, her voice firmer now. And he's not anyone, Marcus. He just helped me pay for gas. Now move your truck, so I can leave. Not anyone. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the empty parking lot. Look at that suit. Look at that car. Nobody dresses like that at midnight, unless they're up to something. What are you, Bella? His side piece. You spreading your legs for gas money now? Dominic's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Anyone who knew him well would have recognized the danger in that subtle movement. The way his weight settled more evenly on both feet. The way his hands hung loose at his sides, ready but not threatening. The way his eyes went flat and cold as winter steel. You need to get back in your truck, Dominic said quietly. His voice carried none of the emotion Marcus was projecting, which somehow made it more menacing. This situation doesn't concern you anymore. Doesn't concern me? Marcus took 3 aggressive steps toward Dominic, closing the distance to about 10 feet. That's my wife you're trying to fuck. That concerns me plenty. The larger man moved slightly, positioning himself to flank Dominic if the confrontation turned physical. 2 against 1 in a parking lot at midnight, and they clearly expected the well-dressed businessman to back down or run. They were making a fundamental miscalculation about who they were dealing with. Isabella stepped between them, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the urgency of preventing violence. Marcus, please. This doesn't have to be anything. Just move your truck and let me go home. Home? Marcus's laugh was bitter and chemical-edged. You mean my home? The apartment I paid for? The furniture I bought? You took everything, Bella. Everything. And now you're here with this prick who thinks he can buy what's mine. I left because you were using again, Isabella said, her voice breaking despite her attempt to stay strong. Because you stole money from my purse to buy meth. Because you pushed me into a wall and told me I was worthless. The judge gave me everything in the divorce because you showed up to court high and threatened the bailiff. Marcus's face flushed red with rage. You lying bitch. I never. Don't. Dominic's single word cut through Marcus's tirade like a blade. Don't speak to her like that again. Marcus's attention snapped back to Dominic, his drug-fueled bravado making him reckless. Or what? You gonna fight me, old man? You gonna defend her honor like some knight in shining armor? He turned to his large friend. You believe this guy, Tommy? Thinks he's somebody. Tommy cracked his knuckles, a theatrical gesture meant to intimidate. Want me to teach him some manners? Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his security chief, whose job included monitoring Dominic's location when he dismissed his driver. The message would be simple, requesting his status, making sure the boss hadn't run into trouble. Dominic ignored it. Last chance, Dominic said to Marcus. His voice remained calm, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Move your truck. Walk away. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt. Marcus was almost screaming now, his face contorted with rage and chemical paranoia. You threaten me at a gas station and tell me nobody gets hurt? I'm gonna break your fucking jaw, take your wallet, and teach my wife what happens when she disrespects me. He lunged forward, faster than someone that high probably should have moved, his fist aimed at Dominic's face with all the refinement of a bar fight. What happened next lasted, perhaps 5 seconds, but would reshape the trajectory of multiple lives. Dominic sidestepped Marcus's wild punch with minimal movement, using his attacker's momentum against him. His hand shot out, fingers finding the pressure point just behind Marcus's ear. The smaller man's legs buckled instantly as his nervous system short-circuited from the precisely applied force. Tommy charged forward with a roar, his massive bulk intended to overwhelm through sheer mass. But Dominic had fought men twice Tommy's size in situations far more dangerous than a gas station parking lot. He dropped low, driving his shoulder into Tommy's midsection while simultaneously sweeping the larger man's feet. Tommy hit the pavement hard, the air exploding from his lungs in a painful whoosh. Marcus was trying to push himself up, his movements uncoordinated from both the drugs and Dominic's strike. Dominic placed one expensive Italian leather shoe on Marcus's back, applying just enough pressure to keep him down without causing permanent damage. "Stay," Dominic said quietly. Isabella stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth as she watched the brief, efficient violence. She'd seen Marcus fight before, seen him throw wild punches in bar parking lots, seen him get bloody and bruised in disputes over drugs or money or perceived disrespect. But she'd never seen anyone handle him the way the stranger just had. With economy of motion, with professional precision, with the kind of skill that came from years of practice at violence. Tommy was groaning on the pavement, trying to suck air back into his lungs. Marcus had gone still under Dominic's foot, either from fear or the lingering effects of having his nervous system temporarily scrambled. Dominic pulled out his phone and made a call. When the person on the other end answered, he spoke 3 words, "Station 7. Now." He ended the call and looked at Isabella, his expression softening slightly when he saw her fear. Not fear of Marcus anymore, fear of him. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Isabella shook her head mutely. "When was your divorce finalized?" 8 months ago." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Does he have visitation rights? Any legal reason to contact you?" "No. No kids. The judge granted a restraining order, but Marcus ignores it." Dominic's jaw tightened. He looked down at Marcus, still pinned under his foot. "You're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." "Fuck you," Marcus spat out, trying to sound defiant but mostly managing to sound terrified. "Your ex-wife is under my protection now. That means if you come within 100 feet of her, if you call her, if you so much as think about her, you're going to have problems that make your meth habit look like a minor inconvenience. Do you understand? Who the fuck are you? Someone whose name you don't want to know. Now, do you understand?" Marcus nodded frantically. Tommy, still gasping on the pavement, managed a weak, "Yeah, we understand." Headlights swept across the parking lot as a black Escalade pulled in, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd received an urgent summons from their employer. 2 men emerged, both wearing dark suits despite the hour, both moving with the coiled awareness of trained security personnel. "Mr. Santoro," the first man said, his eyes quickly assessing the scene. "Situation. These 2 gentlemen were just leaving," Dominic said, removing his foot from Marcus's back. "Help them find their way out. Make sure they understand that Station 7 is no longer somewhere they want to visit." The security team didn't need further explanation. They hauled Marcus and Tommy to their feet with professional efficiency, checking them for weapons before gesturing toward the jacked-up pickup truck. Their body language made it clear that compliance wasn't optional. As the truck peeled out of the parking lot with squealing tires, Isabella finally found her voice. "Who are you?" Dominic turned back to her, studying her face in the harsh fluorescent light. She deserved the truth, or at least enough of it to understand what had just happened. "My name is Dominic Santoro. I'm a businessman with interests across the city, and as of tonight, anyone who threatens you will answer to me." "I don't understand. Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. How could he explain that sometimes fate put you in a position to help someone, and refusing that opportunity was a kind of moral failure he'd committed too many times before? How could he tell her that watching her count pennies at a gas station had reminded him of every struggle his mother had faced, every sacrifice she'd made, every moment of desperation she'd endured alone? Because everyone deserves to pump gas without being attacked by their ex-husband, he said finally. And because I'm in a position to make sure that doesn't happen again. One of a security team approached respectfully. Sir, we should probably move on before local PD shows up asking questions. Dominic nodded but didn't immediately leave. He pulled a business card from his wallet. Simple white cardstock with embossed lettering. Just a name and phone number, no title or company affiliation. Keep this, he told Isabella, pressing it into her hand. If Marcus bothers you again, if anyone bothers you, you call that number. Day or night, someone will answer. Isabella stared at the card, then back at Dominic. I don't know what to say. Say you'll drive safe going home. Say you'll call if you need help. He paused, then added, and say you'll stop working yourself into exhaustion trying to survive on $32.16. Isabella's eyes widened. How did you? Your phone was open when you got out of your car. I saw the bank balance notification. Dominic gestured toward his waiting security team. Tomorrow morning, go to Santoro Enterprises on Harbor Street. Ask for Patricia Chen. Tell her I sent you. They need someone for their hospitality division, scheduling, customer service, coordination work. The pay is fair and the hours are reasonable. No double shifts. No working until midnight. I can't just accept a job from a stranger. You're not accepting from a stranger. You're accepting from someone who recognizes talent being wasted. Dominic turned toward his Escalade. The interview is at 10. Don't be late. As the security team opened the door for him, Isabella called out one more time. Mr. Santoro? Why me? There must be hundreds of people struggling, just like me in this city. Why help me specifically? Dominic paused with one foot in the vehicle, looking back at her across the parking lot. The question deserved an honest answer. Because you were here. Because you needed help. Because sometimes the universe puts you in the right place at the right time, and you get to choose whether to walk past someone's suffering or to do something about it. He smiled slightly. I'm trying to make better choices than I used to. The Escalade pulled away, leaving Isabella standing alone in the gas station parking lot with $23.47 worth of gas in her tank, a business card clutched in her hand, and the growing realization that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. She looked up at the night sky, at the stars barely visible through the light pollution of the city, and whispered a prayer of gratitude to whoever or whatever had sent Dominic Santoro to Station 7 at precisely 12:17 on a Wednesday night in September. Tomorrow she would wake up exhausted from another double shift. Tomorrow she would face the same mountains of debt and impossible choices. But tomorrow, for the first time in 8 months, she would also wake up with hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to change everything. The morning sun cut through Isabella's apartment window with aggressive brightness, pulling her from the 3 hours of sleep she'd managed to grab. Her alarm hadn't even gone off yet. Her body was so conditioned to exhaustion that it woke her automatically now, running on some internal timer that measured survival in shifts and paychecks. She lay there for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment, wondering if last night had been real or some kind of fever dream brought on by 16-hour workdays and chronic stress. But then her eyes landed on the business card sitting on her nightstand, and she knew it had all happened. The gas station, the stranger in the expensive suit, Marcus and his violent rage, the way Dominic Santoro had handled both men like they were nothing more than annoying obstacles. The card was simple, almost aggressively understated for someone who commanded that kind of presence. White cardstock, slightly textured, with raised black lettering, Dominic Santoro, and a phone number. No title, no company name, no email address or website, just the name and a way to reach him. Isabella picked up the card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Who was this man who dressed like he owned the city, fought like a trained soldier, and offered jobs to struggling waitresses at gas stations? She'd lived in the city her entire 32 years, worked every kind of service job imaginable, and she'd learned to recognize the different levels of power that moved through the streets. There were managers who thought they were important, business owners who actually were, politicians who pretended to have influence. And then there were people like Dominic Santoro, people whose power was so fundamental they didn't need to announce it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her boss at the packaging plant. "Where are you?" "Shift started 10 minutes ago." Isabella's stomach dropped as she looked at the clock. 6:10 a.m. She'd overslept. In 3 years of working at Marshall Packaging, she'd never been late once, never called in sick, never missed a shift. And now she was lying in bed, holding a business card from a stranger, about to make a decision that would determine whether she spent the rest of her life trapped in survival mode or took a chance on something that might be too good to be true. She called her supervisor, a woman named Denise, who'd always been fair if not exactly warm. The phone rang 4 times before Denise answered, her voice already tight with irritation. "Isabella, you need to be here. We got 3 production lines running and we're short-staffed." "I know. I'm sorry." Isabella sat up, her mind racing through possibilities. "Something came up last night. A family emergency. I need to take a personal day." "A personal day?" Denise's tone suggested this was roughly equivalent to requesting a paid vacation to Mars. "You've never taken a personal day in 3 years. You don't get to just decide the morning of." "I'm aware of the policy, but I'm taking one anyway." Isabella surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'll be back tomorrow." There was a long pause on the other end. When Denise spoke again, her voice had shifted from irritation to something harder. "You know what? Don't bother coming back tomorrow. Or ever. Consider this your termination. Effective immediately." The line went dead. Isabella stared at her phone, waiting for the panic to hit. She'd just been fired from a job that paid $12.50 an hour with no benefits and mandatory overtime. A job that left her hands covered in cuts from packaging materials and her back screaming from standing on concrete for 8 hours straight. A job that represented stability and rent money and the difference between surviving and drowning. But the panic didn't come. Instead, she felt something unexpected: relief. She pulled herself out of bed and walked to her tiny bathroom, studying her reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Hair that needed cutting but she couldn't afford the salon. Skin that looked sallow from too little sleep and too much stress. At 32, she looked closer to 40, worn down by circumstances that never seemed to improve, no matter how hard she worked. "Okay," she said to her reflection. "Let's see if last night was real, or if I just destroyed my life over a fever dream." She showered in water that never quite got hot enough, dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a black skirt and white blouse that she bought at Goodwill for her divorce proceedings, and carefully applied makeup that made her look slightly less exhausted. The whole time, her mind kept circling back to Dominic Santoro's words. "Tomorrow morning, go to Santoro Enterprises on Harbor Street. Ask for Patricia Chin." At 9:30, Isabella stood outside a glass and steel building in the business district, staring up at the letters etched into the facade. Santoro Enterprises. The building was 12 stories of modern architecture, all clean lines and tinted windows that reflected the morning sun. People in expensive suits moved through the revolving doors with the confident purpose of individuals who made 6 figures and considered it normal. Isabella clutched her purse, a worn leather bag that had seen better days, and tried to convince herself she belonged here, that she wasn't about to walk into a building full of important people and make a fool of herself based on a midnight encounter at a gas station. The lobby was everything her apartment wasn't: spacious, climate-controlled, filled with art that probably cost more than her car. A massive reception desk curved along one wall, staffed by 3 people who looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate fashion magazine. Marble floors reflected the recessed lighting, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Isabella approached the nearest receptionist, a young woman with perfect posture and a smile that was professional without being warm. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Patricia Chin. My name is Isabella Martinez. Dominic Santoro sent me." The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly at Dominic's name. The professional smile became genuine, and her fingers flew across her keyboard with new urgency. "Of course, Ms. Martinez. Miss Chen is expecting you. Please take the elevator to the 10th floor. Someone will meet you there." As Isabella rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb with mechanical precision, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was really happening. Whatever this was, it was real. The building was real. The receptionist's reaction to Dominic's name was real. And whatever came next would determine whether she'd made the best or worst decision of her life. The elevator doors opened onto a floor that managed to feel both professional and welcoming. Warm wood tones mixed with modern furniture. Natural light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of a city skyline. A woman in her 50s stood waiting, her expression open and kind. "Isabella Martinez?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia Chen, Director of Operations for Santoro Hospitality Division. Dominic called me personally this morning. Said I absolutely needed to meet you." They shook hands, and Patricia's grip was firm and confident. She led Isabella through an open office space where dozens of people worked at computers, answered phones, and moved between cubicles with organized efficiency. This wasn't just a job, this was a career. These people had health insurance and retirement plans and paychecks that didn't require counting pennies. Patricia's office was modest but comfortable, with a view of the harbor and photographs of what appeared to be her family covering one wall. She gestured for Isabella to sit in one of 2 chairs facing her desk. "First, let me be direct," Patricia said, settling into her own chair. "When Dominic Santoro personally calls me at 8 in the morning and tells me to interview someone, that person gets hired. So this conversation isn't really about whether you get the job. It's about finding the right position where you'll thrive." Isabella's throat tightened. "I don't understand. Why would he do that? He doesn't even know me." Patricia smiled gently. "Dominic has good instincts about people. If he believes you have value, then you have value. Now, tell me about your work experience." For the next 45 minutes, Isabella walked Patricia through her employment history. The textile factory where she'd worked after high school, the various waitressing jobs, the packaging plant she'd just been fired from that morning, the double shifts and the constant struggle to make ends meet. As she spoke, she expected to see judgment or pity in Patricia's eyes. Instead, she saw understanding. "You've been working since you were 16, Patricia said when Isabella finished. "You've held down multiple jobs simultaneously. You've never been fired until this morning when you chose to come here instead. That tells me you're reliable, hardworking, and willing to take calculated risks when opportunity presents itself." "Or it tells you I'm desperate," Isabella said, surprising herself with her honesty. Patricia laughed, a warm sound that filled the office. Desperate people make excellent employees. They show up. They work hard. They appreciate what they have because they know what it's like to have nothing. She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "The position I have in mind is Guest Services Coordinator for our hospitality properties. We own 4 hotels in the city and manage 3 more under contract. Your job would be coordinating with front desk staff, handling guest complaints, managing scheduling for housekeeping and maintenance. It requires organization, problem-solving, and the ability to stay calm when things go wrong." Isabella leaned forward. "That sounds like waitressing with better pay." "Exactly. The salary is $48,000 a year, plus full benefits, health, dental, vision, life insurance, and 401k matching. 2 weeks paid vacation, sick leave, and we're closed for major holidays. Standard hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, with occasional evening events that pay overtime." Isabella did the math in her head. 48,000 divided by 12 months was 4,000 a month. That was more than twice what she'd been making between both her jobs. That was rent paid on time. That was groceries bought without calculating every item. That was prescription medications filled when she needed them. That was a life beyond mere survival. "When can I start?" The words came out before Isabella could stop them. Patricia smiled. "How about Monday? That gives you a few days to get your affairs in order. Close out your other job properly. Take a breath. Maybe buy yourself something nice with your signing bonus." Signing bonus. Patricia pushed a document across the desk. $2,000, paid with your first paycheck. Dominic was specific about that. Said you probably needed it. Isabella stared at the employment agreement, her eyes blurring with tears she refused to let fall. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a lifeline. This was rescue from a life that had been slowly drowning her in exhaustion and despair. "Why?" she whispered. "Why is he doing this for me?" Patricia's expression grew thoughtful. "I've worked for Dominic for 12 years. I've seen him build this company from a small real estate investment firm into a diversified enterprise with legitimate businesses across multiple sectors. And I've learned that he operates by a code most people wouldn't understand. He believes in protecting people who can't protect themselves. He believes in creating opportunities where none existed. And he believes that the measure of power isn't what you can take, but what you choose to give. He said something similar last night. Then you're already beginning to understand him. Patricia handed Isabella a pen. Sign the agreement. Start Monday. And Isabella, don't waste energy trying to figure out why you deserve this. Just accept that someone saw your value and decided to invest in it. Isabella signed the document with shaking hands, her signature looking small and uncertain on the official letterhead. But as she wrote her name, she felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was no longer just surviving. She was building something. As Patricia walked her back to the elevators, Isabella couldn't resist asking one more question. What kind of business does Dominic actually run, besides hotels and hospitality? Patricia's smile was carefully neutral. Dominic has interests in construction, real estate development, import-export, entertainment venues, and various investment portfolios. He's a businessman who understands that legitimate enterprise provides stability and growth. She paused as the elevator doors opened. Some people might tell you stories about his past, about the family he came from, and the way he built his empire. My advice is to judge him by what he does now, not by rumors about where he came from. The elevator descended, and Isabella processed Patricia's carefully worded response. She'd lived in this city long enough to understand what wasn't being said. Dominic Santoro wasn't just a businessman. He was someone whose influence extended beyond boardrooms and legitimate enterprises. Someone whose name made receptionists snap to attention, and whose phone call guaranteed employment. She thought about the way he'd moved last night, the efficiency with which he'd handled Marcus and Tommy, the security team that appeared within minutes of his call, the way he'd spoken to Marcus with absolute authority, promising consequences that clearly terrified her ex-husband. Isabella wasn't naive. She understood she'd crossed paths with someone dangerous, someone whose protection came with implications she couldn't fully grasp. But as she stepped back out onto Harbor Street, clutching her signed employment agreement and the promise of a signing bonus that would pay 2 months' rent, she found she didn't care. Dominic Santoro had seen her at her lowest point and chosen to help. Whatever his reasons, whatever his business, whatever darkness existed in his world, none of it changed the fact that he'd offered her a way out of drowning. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Patricia tells me you signed. Good choice. My driver will pick you up from your address tonight at 7. We need to discuss your ex-husband. DS. Isabella stared at the message, her heart rate accelerating. She'd assumed last night was over. That Marcus's confrontation at the gas station had been the end of whatever strange intersection had occurred between her life and Dominic's world. But apparently, she'd been wrong. She typed back, "You don't need to send a driver. I can take the bus." The response came within seconds. "You're under my protection now. That means you don't take buses at night. My driver will be there at 7. Don't argue." Isabella found herself smiling despite the authoritarian tone. Nobody had taken care of her in years. Not since before Marcus, before the drugs and the violence, and the divorce that left her with nothing but debt and trauma. The idea that someone, anyone, was concerned about her safety felt foreign and overwhelming and oddly comforting. She spent the afternoon in her apartment, cleaning with an energy she hadn't felt in months. She called her supervisor at Rosie's Diner, giving 2 weeks' notice despite knowing they'd probably tell her not to bother finishing. She organized the bills, stacked on her kitchen counter, calculating how the signing bonus would change her impossible mathematics. She even allowed herself a moment of pure, unfiltered hope. At precisely 7 o'clock, a black town car pulled up outside her building. The driver, a professional-looking man in his 40s wearing a dark suit, emerged and opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Martinez, I'm James. Mr. Santoro sent me to bring you to dinner." Dinner. Not a meeting. Not a discussion. Dinner. Isabella had changed into the only dress she owned that wasn't a uniform, a simple navy blue piece she bought for a cousin's wedding 3 years ago. She'd spent 20 minutes on makeup, trying to look presentable for whatever this evening would bring. The drive took them through the financial district, past the renovated waterfront, into a neighborhood Isabella recognized as one of the city's most exclusive areas. James pulled up in front of a restaurant called Bella Vista, a place Isabella had walked past dozens of times but never dreamed of entering. The prices in the window were the kind that made working people laugh bitterly and keep walking. A valet opened her door, and suddenly she was standing on a red carpet, walking toward an entrance where a maitre d' was already expecting her. "Ms. Martinez, Mr. Santoro is waiting. Please follow me." The restaurant's interior was elegant without being ostentatious. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, the quiet murmur of conversations held by people who never worried about gas money or overdue bills. The maitre d' led her through the main dining room to a private area in the back, separated by frosted glass panels that provided privacy while maintaining sight lines to the exits. Dominic Santoro stood as she entered, his suit different from last night but equally expensive. His expression was warm, genuinely pleased to see her. "Isabella, thank you for coming." "You didn't really give me a choice," she said, then immediately regretted the sharp tone. "I'm sorry. That was rude. Thank you for the invitation." Dominic smiled, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Don't apologize for honesty. I appreciate directness." Once she was seated, he continued, "How did the interview go with Patricia? She offered me the job, which I'm guessing you already knew, since you apparently orchestrated the entire thing." "I made a phone call. Patricia made her own decision based on your qualifications." "Qualifications?" Isabella couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "I'm a waitress with a high school diploma and 3 years of packaging experience. I don't have qualifications for a $48,000 a year position." Dominic poured wine from a bottle Isabella couldn't pronounce, filling both their glasses. "You've worked multiple jobs simultaneously for 15 years. You've managed complex schedules, dealt with difficult customers, solved problems under pressure, and maintained perfect attendance despite circumstances that would have broken most people. Those are exactly the qualifications Patricia needs." A waiter appeared silently, placing appetizers on the table, something that looked artistic and expensive. Isabella's stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday's half sandwich during her lunch break at the diner. "Eat," Dominic said gently. "We have time." As Isabella took a tentative bite of what turned out to be the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted, Dominic's expression grew more serious. "I need to talk to you about Marcus." The food suddenly felt heavy in Isabella's stomach. "What about him?" "After last night's incident, I had my people look into his background. His drug use is worse than you probably realize. He's been arrested 3 times in the past 8 months for possession and assault. He's connected with a distribution network that operates out of the East Side projects. And most concerning, he's been violating the restraining order regularly. Following you to work, sitting outside your apartment, making calls from burner phones." Isabella's hands started trembling, the fork clattering against her plate. "How do you know all this?" "Because I made it my business to know." Dominic's voice was calm but firm. "You're under my protection now, which means I need to understand all potential threats to your safety." "I didn't ask for your protection." "No, but you have it anyway." Dominic leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "Marcus is dangerous. The drugs have made him paranoid and violent. He believes you're his property, and he won't accept that the relationship is over. Last night's confrontation won't be the last." "So what do you want me to do? Hide? Live in fear?" "No. I want you to let me handle it." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Isabella couldn't fully process. "Handle it how?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "There are ways to ensure Marcus understands that pursuing you will have consequences he can't afford. Legal ways. Pressure that can be applied through channels that don't involve violence, but make it very clear that his current path leads nowhere good. And if he doesn't listen to pressure, then other options become necessary." Isabella stared at him, seeing past the expensive suit and careful words to the reality underneath. Dominic Santoro wasn't offering protection through lawyers and restraining orders. He was offering protection through the kind of influence that made men like Marcus disappear or change their behavior permanently. "I need to be very clear about something," she said, her voice steady despite the fear and confusion swirling through her. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Not even Marcus. He's sick, he's addicted, he's made terrible choices, but I don't want his blood on my conscience. Dominic's expression softened. That's why you deserve protection, Isabella. Because even after everything he's done to you, you still see him as human. Most people in your situation would want revenge. You want safety without causing harm. He paused. I can work with that. My people can ensure Marcus receives the help he needs, rehab, supervised housing, job training when he's clean. But it comes with conditions. He stays away from you. Permanently. No contact. No harassment. No driving past your apartment at 2 a.m. checking to see if you're home. How do you know he does that? Because I had security watching your building since last night. Marcus showed up 3 times between midnight and 4 a.m. Just sitting in his truck, staring at your windows. My people documented everything. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Isabella felt simultaneously violated by the surveillance and grateful for the protection. This is a lot to process. I know, and I'm not asking you to process it all tonight. Dominic gestured to the untouched meal. Eat. We can talk about logistics later. For now, just accept that you're safe. That someone is watching your back. That you don't have to face Marcus or anyone else alone. They ate in companionable silence for several minutes, the tension gradually easing. The food was extraordinary, courses Isabella couldn't name, but that melted on her tongue like poetry. Wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. An atmosphere of safety and luxury that felt completely surreal after years of struggle. Can I ask you something? Isabella said as dessert arrived, something chocolate and architectural that looked too beautiful to eat. Anything. Why me? And don't give me the line about being in the right place at the right time. You could have paid for my gas and walked away. You could have broken up the fight with Marcus and left. But instead you're offering me jobs and protection and dinner at restaurants I can't afford. Why? Dominic was quiet for so long that Isabella thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain carefully controlled. 23 years ago, my mother stood in a grocery store counting change to buy milk for my younger sister. She was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and slowly dying from exhaustion and stress. A man in line behind her, someone I never met, never learned his name, paid for her entire cart of groceries. $247 worth of food. He told her the same thing I told you. Pass it forward when you can. He paused, staring into his wine glass. My mother lived another 6 years after that. 6 years where she didn't have to work quite as hard because I'd started making money and could help. 6 years where she smiled more and worried less. 6 years that strangers' kindness had bought her. When she died, I promised myself that if I ever had power and resources, I would use them the way that stranger used his. To help people who deserved better than the circumstances they'd been dealt. Isabella felt tears pressing against her eyes. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be sorry. Honor her by accepting help when it's offered. By building the life she would have wanted for you. By becoming the person who can eventually help someone else standing at a gas station counting pennies. They finished dinner as the restaurant began to empty around them, the late evening crowd thinning to just a few lingering tables. Dominic walked her to the waiting town car, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that felt protective rather than possessive. James will take you home. Tomorrow, someone from my security team will contact you about installing better locks on your apartment door and window sensors. Don't argue about it. Isabella smiled despite herself. You're very bossy for someone who claims to be helping. I'm very effective for someone who claims to be helping, Dominic corrected with a slight smile. There's a difference. Start your new job Monday. Let me handle Marcus. Focus on building the life you deserve. As the town car pulled away from Bella Vista, Isabella watched Dominic through the rear window. He stood on the curb, hands in his pockets, watching her leave with an expression she couldn't quite read. Satisfaction, maybe. Or something deeper. Something that looked almost like redemption. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Tommy from last night. Marcus wants me to tell you he's sorry. He's checking into rehab tomorrow. Won't bother you again. Don't know what you said to that guy in the suit, but Marcus is scared shitless. Good for you. Isabella stared at the message, processing the implications. Dominic had moved faster than she'd expected. Whatever pressure he'd applied, whatever conversations had occurred in the 12 hours since the gas station confrontation, it had been effective enough to send Marcus into rehab and terrify Tommy into sending apologetic texts. She should have felt concerned about the speed and efficiency of Dominic's intervention. Should have worried about what kind of man could reshape her ex-husband's entire life trajectory with a few phone calls. Should have questioned what she was getting herself into by accepting help from someone with that kind of reach and influence. Instead, she felt safe for the first time in 8 months. As James drove her home through streets that no longer felt quite so threatening, Isabella made a decision. She would take Dominic's help. She would start the new job. She would build the life she deserved. And when she was stable and strong and finally breathing without the constant weight of survival pressing down on her lungs, she would figure out how to pass forward the kindness a stranger had shown her at a gas station at midnight. Because that was how these things worked. Someone helped you when you needed it most. And then you helped someone else when you could, creating ripples of kindness that spread outward like light pushing back darkness. The town car pulled up outside her apartment building, and James opened her door with professional courtesy. "Mr. Santoro wanted me to give you this," he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a note in precise handwriting. "For emergencies, groceries, or anything else you need before your first paycheck. Not a loan, not charity, just a bridge between where you were and where you're going. Also in the envelope, 20 crisp $100 bills. Isabella stood on the sidewalk outside her shabby apartment building, holding $2,000 in cash and a business card from a man who'd appeared in her life like some kind of avenging angel. She looked up at the night sky, at the stars barely visible through light pollution and city smog, and said a prayer of thanks to whatever force had put her at Station 7 at precisely the right moment to cross paths with Dominic Santoro. Tomorrow she would wake up without the crushing weight of immediate crisis, without the fear of Marcus showing up drunk or high, without the exhaustion of double shifts and impossible choices. Tomorrow, for the first time in years, she would wake up with hope. And sometimes, hope was the most valuable thing anyone could give. 3 weeks into her new position at Santoro Enterprises, Isabella Martinez stood in the 10th floor break room, staring at her reflection in the window that overlooked the harbor. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, well-rested, professionally dressed, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who knew her rent was paid and her refrigerator was full. The transformation hadn't been immediate. The first week, she'd woken up at 4:30 every morning in a panic, convinced she'd overslept for her packaging plant shift before remembering she didn't work there anymore. She'd caught herself calculating the cost of her coffee before remembering she could afford the good beans now. She'd walked past the clearance rack at the grocery store 3 times before forcing herself to buy the fresh vegetables she actually wanted instead of whatever was cheapest and closest to expiring. Patricia Chun had been right about the job. Guest services coordinator was essentially high-end waitressing, managing expectations, solving problems, keeping multiple priorities organized while staying calm when things inevitably went wrong. The difference was the pay, the respect, and the 8-hour shifts that didn't leave her physically destroyed at the end of each day. "Isabella!" A voice pulled her from her thoughts. Maria Santos, one of the front desk supervisors from the flagship Santoro Grand Hotel, stood in the doorway holding a tablet. "We've got a situation at the Grand. Wedding party arrived 6 hours early. Bride is having a meltdown because her suite isn't ready and the previous guests haven't checked out yet. Can you work your magic?" This was what Isabella had discovered she was genuinely good at: crisis management. The ability to stay calm when everyone else was panicking, to find creative solutions to impossible problems, to make people feel heard and valued even when she couldn't give them exactly what they wanted. "Tell the bride I'll be there in 20 minutes, Isabella said, already mentally running through options. Have housekeeping prioritize the presidential suite. It's bigger than what she booked anyway. Offer champagne and appetizers in the lounge while we get it ready. And Maria, make sure someone on your team stays with her the entire time. Anxious brides need constant reassurance." Maria grinned. This is why Patricia keeps saying you're the best hire we've had in 5 years. As Isabella gathered her things and headed for the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to see you tonight. My office, 8 p.m. Important. DS, her stomach flipped. She hadn't seen Dominic since that dinner at Bella Vista 3 weeks ago, though his influence had been present in every aspect of her new life. The security system installed in her apartment within 48 hours of their conversation. The seamless transition into her new job. The complete absence of Marcus, who according to Tommy's sporadic updates was 90 days into a court-mandated rehab program that Dominic had somehow arranged. Isabella had convinced herself that their paths wouldn't cross again. That Dominic Santoro was the kind of man who helped people and then moved on to the next crisis, the next person in need, the next opportunity to exercise the peculiar code of honor that seemed to drive him. She'd been both relieved and disappointed by his absence, grateful for the space to adjust to her new life, but oddly missing the intensity of his presence. Now he wanted to see her. And the text said important, which could mean anything from a problem with her employment to something about Marcus to... She didn't let herself think about other possibilities. She spent the rest of the day managing the wedding crisis. The presidential suite worked perfectly, the bride cried happy tears and hugged Isabella 3 times, coordinating with maintenance about a broken elevator at the Harborview property, and training a new hire on the guest services software. By 7:30, she was standing outside the Santoro Enterprises building, staring up at the lit windows on the 12th floor where executive offices occupied the entire level. The lobby was empty except for a single security guard who checked her ID and directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. Mr. Santoro is expecting you, Ms. Martinez. 12th floor, turn left, end of the hall. The elevator rose smoothly, and Isabella used the mirrored walls to check her appearance. She changed from her work clothes into a simple black dress and heels. Professional, but not trying too hard, she hoped. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. Minimal makeup. Nothing about her appearance suggested she'd spent 45 minutes agonizing over what to wear for a meeting that might be purely professional. The 12th floor was quiet, most offices dark except for emergency lighting and exit signs. But at the end of the hall, light spilled from an open doorway. Isabella's heels clicked against marble floors as she approached, each step feeling like a countdown to something significant. Dominic's office was enormous but surprisingly understated. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, lights stretching to the horizon like a constellation brought to Earth. The furniture was modern and expensive but not ostentatious. What caught Isabella's attention were the photographs covering one wall, black and white images of the city from different eras, showing its transformation from industrial port to modern metropolis. Dominic stood at the windows, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city lights. He turned as she entered, and Isabella felt her breath catch slightly. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket, just dress pants, and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. It was the most casual she'd seen him, and somehow it made him seem more real, more human, less like the avenging angel who'd appeared at a gas station, and more like a man who got tired at the end of long days. Isabella, thank you for coming. He gestured to a sitting area away from his desk, 2 leather chairs facing each other across a low table. Can I get you anything? Wine, coffee, water. Water is fine. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Dominic poured 2 glasses from a carafe on the side table and settled into the chair across from her. Up close, she could see signs of fatigue around his eyes, tension in his shoulders that suggested whatever he needed to discuss was weighing on him. Patricia tells me you're exceeding expectations, he said. Says you've handled 3 major crises in 3 weeks and turned them all into positive guest experiences. The bride from today's wedding personally called to say you saved her entire event. I just did my job. You did it exceptionally well. That's not the same thing. Dominic paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I need to talk to you about something that's going to sound complicated and possibly frightening. I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Isabella's heart rate accelerated. Okay. 3 days ago, federal agents approached several of my business associates with questions about my operations. They're building a case, trying to establish connections between my legitimate enterprises and alleged illegal activities. This isn't new. I've been under investigation on and off for 15 years. Usually, nothing comes of it because I'm very careful about maintaining separation between different aspects of my business interests." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But this time they've found something. Not evidence of wrongdoing exactly, but a connection they can exploit. They know about you." Isabella's blood ran cold. "What do you mean they know about me?" "The incident at the gas station was captured on security cameras. The teenager who filmed me helping Maria Santos at the grocery store 3 months ago. That video went viral again last week after a news outlet did a story about mysterious benefactor sightings around the city. Federal investigators connected the dots. They know I've been helping people, you, Maria, others. And they're trying to use it against me. I don't understand. How is helping people illegal?" "It's not." Dominic's voice was patient but strained. "But they're arguing that I'm using charitable acts to build public goodwill and create a network of people who owe me favors. They're painting it as a sophisticated influence operation, trying to establish a pattern that makes my legitimate business dealings look like fronts for organized crime." Isabella felt sick. "So I'm evidence in a federal case against you? You're a complication they think they can exploit." Dominic stood, moving to the windows as if the city lights offered answers. "They've already approached Marcus." "What?" Isabella was on her feet now, water glass forgotten. "Why would they talk to Marcus?" "Because they think they can pressure him to testify that I threatened him, that I used violence or intimidation to force him into rehab, that my protection of you is actually about establishing control." Dominic turned back to face her. "Marcus told them to go to hell, for what it's worth. Said he went to rehab voluntarily, and that I saved his life by giving him a chance to get clean. But they're not giving up." Isabella's mind raced through implications. "What do they want from me?" "They want you to testify that I've been manipulating you. That the job was coercion, not opportunity. That I'm controlling your life through financial dependence. That you're afraid to refuse my help because of what I might do." The absurdity of it hit Isabella like a physical blow. She started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the large office. "That's insane. You gave me a job I'm qualified for. You helped me escape an abusive ex-husband. You've been nothing but respectful and professional. I know that. You know that. But federal prosecutors are very good at taking factual events and arranging them into narratives that sound sinister." Dominic moved closer, his expression pained. "I need you to understand something, Isabella. I will not ask you to lie for me. If federal agents want to interview you, you tell them exactly what happened. The truth. Nothing embellished, nothing concealed. You don't owe me anything." "Except my entire current life," Isabella shot back. "Except my safety and my job and my ability to sleep at night without worrying about Marcus showing up drunk and violent. Those things were freely given. No strings attached. That's not how debt works." Isabella stared at him, seeing past the careful control to the vulnerability underneath. Dominic Santoro was genuinely worried, not about prosecution, she realized, but about her. About the possibility that his help had somehow put her in danger or compromised her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "When are they going to contact me?" she asked quietly. "Probably within the next week. They'll approach you away from work, make it seem casual. Ask if you'd be willing to answer some questions about your employer. Make it sound like routine background investigation." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I want you to have a lawyer present. Someone who can protect your interests and make sure they don't twist your words." "I can't afford a lawyer. I've already retained one for you. Sophia Castellano, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state. She'll be in touch tomorrow." When Isabella started to protest, Dominic held up his hand. "This isn't about me. This is about making sure you're protected. Federal investigators can be very intimidating. Having an attorney ensures they follow proper procedures." Isabella sank back into her chair, processing the surreal turn her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, her biggest problem was whether she could afford gas to get to work. Now she was apparently a witness in a federal investigation of organized crime. "There's something else," Dominic said, and his tone made Isabella's stomach drop. "The Castellano family knows about you." "Who?" "Salvatore Castellano. He runs a rival organization. We've been in territorial disputes for years. Docks, construction contracts, import licensing. He's been looking for leverage against me, and now he thinks he's found it. Dominic's expression was grim. 3 nights ago, someone tried to follow you home from work. Isabella's breath caught. What? My security team intercepted them 2 blocks from your apartment. 2 men in a black sedan. Amateur surveillance. Probably contracted talent rather than Castellano's people directly. They were taking photographs, documenting your routine. My team convinced them to find other employment. The casual way Dominic said convinced, suggested methods, Isabella didn't want to examine too closely. So I'm in danger. You're protected, Dominic corrected. There's a significant difference. I have teams watching your apartment building, your office, every route you regularly travel. Castellano knows this. The attempted surveillance was more about sending a message to me than actually threatening you. He wants me to know he's identified someone I care about. The words, someone I care about, hung in the air between them, laden with implications neither seemed ready to address directly. This is insane, Isabella said finally. I just wanted to afford gas. Now I'm in the middle of federal investigations and mob territory disputes. Maybe I should just quit, move to another city, start over somewhere your name doesn't follow me. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of emotion carefully controlled. If that's what you want, I'll make it happen. New identity, relocation assistance, job placement in any city you choose. You'll be completely free of any connection to me or my business interests. Safe, anonymous, starting fresh. Is that what you want? What I want, Dominic said slowly, is irrelevant to what's best for you. Bullshit. The profanity surprised them both, but Isabella was tired of dancing around what was really happening. You don't send drivers and security teams and lawyers for someone who's irrelevant to you. You don't look at me the way you do if I'm just another charitable case. So stop being noble and tell me what you actually want. Dominic's careful control cracked slightly, revealing something raw underneath. I want you to be safe. I want you to build the life you deserve without my world complicating it. He stopped, jaw clenched. I want things I have no right to want. Isabella stood slowly, moving closer to where he stood by the windows. The city lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his features. She was close enough now to see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of decades carrying weight most people couldn't imagine. What if I want those things too? She asked quietly. Then you don't understand what you're asking for. Dominic's voice was rough. My world is dangerous. People I care about become targets. Every kindness I show, every connection I make becomes ammunition for enemies to use against me. That's why I usually keep distance. Why I help people and then step back before they become vulnerable through association with me. But you didn't step back from me. No, he admitted. I didn't. Why not? Dominic was silent for so long that Isabella thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you reminded me of my mother. Because you asked for help with such dignity, even when you were humiliated. Because you stood up to your ex-husband despite being terrified. Because you see me, not my reputation or my power or the stories people tell, but the person underneath all of it. He paused. And because from the moment you looked up at me in that gas station, I knew I was in trouble. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. They were standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the war being fought behind his carefully controlled expression. What kind of trouble? She asked, her voice barely steady. The kind where I want things I shouldn't want. Where I make decisions based on what I feel rather than what's smart. Where I compromise everything I've built to keep you safe. Dominic's hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself and pulled back. The kind of trouble that gets people hurt. Maybe I'm willing to risk getting hurt. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Isabella closed the remaining distance between them, looking up into gray eyes that held decades of carefully maintained control. I'm saying that for 3 weeks I've been trying to convince myself you were just being kind. That the job was charity, the protection was duty, the way you looked at me was my imagination. But I don't think it was. And I don't think you think it was either. Dominic's control was fracturing. She could see it in how his breathing had changed, in the tension in his shoulders, in the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides to keep from reaching for her. "If I touch you," he said, his voice strained, "everything changes. You become a permanent part of my world with all the complications and dangers that entails. There's no going back to before. No pretending this is just employer helping employee. Are you sure that's what you want?" Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Isabella answered by reaching up and placing her hand against his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin and the tension in his jaw. "I'm sure." The kiss that followed wasn't gentle or tentative. It was the release of 3 weeks of denied attraction, of tension carefully maintained, of feelings neither had been willing to acknowledge. Dominic's hands came up to frame her face with surprising gentleness, given the intensity of the kiss, and Isabella felt something fundamental click into place inside her chest. This was what she'd been missing. Not just physical connection, but the feeling of being truly seen by someone who understood strength and vulnerability in equal measure. Someone who'd looked at her lowest moment and chosen to help rather than judge. Someone whose darkness was balanced by an almost desperate need to protect the people he cared about. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he said, but his hands remained gentle on her face. "Probably," Isabella agreed, "but I've been making terrible decisions my whole life. At least this one feels right." He laughed, a sound that seemed surprised out of him. "You're going to turn my entire world upside down, aren't you?" "I'm going to try." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing synchronized, the city lights witnessing a connection that had been inevitable from the moment their paths crossed at Station 7. Finally, Dominic pulled back slightly, his expression serious again despite the lingering warmth in his eyes. "We need to talk about what happens next. Practically." Isabella nodded, her mind already shifting into problem-solving mode even as her heart continued racing. "The federal investigation. And Castellano. And the fact that you're now definitively someone I care about, which makes you a more valuable target." Dominic moved back to the sitting area, and Isabella followed. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow you meet with Sofia Castellano, no relation to Salvatore, different family entirely. She'll prepare you for when the feds make contact. You tell them the truth about everything. The gas station, Marcus, the job offer. There's nothing illegal or improper about any of it." "What about tonight?" Isabella asked. "About this." She gestured between them. "Tonight is personal. It doesn't concern federal investigations or business operations. It's between you and me, and it's nobody else's business." Dominic's expression softened. "But Isabella, you need to understand what you're getting into. My world isn't just business meetings and charitable donations. There are aspects of my operations that exist in gray areas of legality. I've made decisions and compromises that keep me up at night. People are afraid of me for reasons that aren't entirely unjustified. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. You deserve honesty, especially now." Isabella considered his words carefully. She wasn't naive enough to think Dominic Santoro had built his empire through purely legitimate means. She'd seen how people reacted to his name, how quickly his single phone call had transformed Marcus from violent addict to compliant rehab patient, how federal prosecutors were dedicating resources to investigating his operations. She understood, on some level, that accepting a relationship with him meant accepting connections to a world that operated by different rules. "My mother used to say that every person is more than their worst decision," Isabella said quietly. "That we're defined by what we do when we have the power to choose, not by the circumstances that forced our hand." She met Dominic's eyes. "You've had power for a long time, and you've chosen to use it to help people who couldn't help themselves. That tells me who you are. Or it tells you who I want to be. Isn't that the same thing?" Dominic smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from dangerous to almost boyish. "You're either incredibly naive or remarkably wise, and I can't figure out which." "Maybe both," Isabella suggested. "Maybe that's what you need. Someone who sees the good you're trying to do without ignoring the complexity of how you do it." They talked for another hour, discussing practical arrangements. Isabella would keep her apartment, but Dominic's security team would maintain their surveillance. She would continue working at Santoro Enterprises, but Patricia would provide documentation showing her hiring process had followed standard protocols with no special treatment. When federal agents made contact, she would answer their questions truthfully with her attorney present. And they would see each other, carefully at first, maintaining some discretion until the federal investigation concluded, but definitely, intentionally exploring whatever this connection between them might become. As James drove Isabella home at nearly midnight, she stared out the window at city streets that looked different now. Not threatening, but complex, full of shadows and light, danger and opportunity, exactly like the man who decided she was worth protecting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on me. Sleep well. Security team confirms your building is clear." She typed back. "Thank you for being patient enough to let me choose this for myself. See you soon." Another text arrived almost immediately. "Tomorrow night, dinner at my place. I'll cook, unless you prefer a restaurant." Isabella smiled at the sudden uncertainty in his words, at the way someone so powerful could still be nervous about whether she wanted to eat dinner at his apartment. She remembered the way he'd kissed her, desperate and controlled simultaneously, and felt warmth flood through her. "Your place sounds perfect. What time?" 7. "I'll send James. And Isabella, I'm glad you said yes to all of it." As the town car pulled up outside her apartment building, Isabella looked up at her third-floor window and saw her reflection in the glass. The same woman from 3 weeks ago, but fundamentally transformed. Not by the job or the money or the security, but by the simple fact that someone had seen her struggle and decided she deserved better. And now that someone had become something more. Something complicated and potentially dangerous and absolutely worth exploring. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the new security-enhanced door, and stood in her living room looking at the life she'd built in 3 short weeks. The groceries in her refrigerator, the bills paid on her counter, the prescription medications filled and organized in her bathroom cabinet, the absence of fear that had colored every moment of her previous existence. Dominic Santoro had given her all of this, not as manipulation or control, but as genuine desire to help someone who needed it. And now he was offering something more: connection, partnership, the possibility of building something real despite the complications of his world and hers colliding. Isabella thought about her mother's words, about people being defined by their choices when they had power. She thought about Dominic choosing to pay for a stranger's gas, to offer protection to someone being harassed, to be honest about the dangers and complications of his life rather than hiding them behind expensive suits and careful words. She thought about her own choice, made in his office with city lights as witnesses, to accept the risks along with the rewards, to see him as human rather than saint or monster, to believe that sometimes the most important connections happen in the most unlikely circumstances. As she got ready for bed, Isabella's phone buzzed one more time. A final text from Dominic. "One more thing. That money I gave you 3 weeks ago, consider it an investment that's already paid dividends. You've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing. Sleep well, Isabella. Tomorrow begins something new for both of us." Isabella fell asleep with her phone on the pillow beside her, a smile on her face, and for the first time in years, absolute certainty that whatever came next, federal investigations, rival mob bosses, the complexities of loving someone from a different world, she could face it without fear. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She was protected, valued, and seen by someone powerful enough to defend her and wise enough to let her choose her own path. And sometimes, that was all anyone needed to transform from barely surviving to genuinely thriving. The gas station had been the beginning. Tonight had been the next chapter. And whatever came after would be written by 2 people willing to take chances on each other despite every logical reason not to. Isabella drifted into sleep with that thought warming her from the inside out, dreaming of city lights and gray eyes and the feeling of being caught by someone who knew how to hold on without crushing what they cared about. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for tonight, she simply let herself feel safe, cherished, and impossibly, wonderfully hopeful about what came next. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you.